to get that extra edge or optimize different components of our life suddenly become an actuality, and things that aren't such biohacking nerd things anymore and are more so real things that we can use in our daily life. And in this case, I'm talking about red light therapy. Okay, red light therapy started out as something that only biohacking nerds looked at because they knew some of the kind of esoteric science behind it. But as it got more popular, we're now seeing all kinds of different research coming out proving that our cells literally are receptive to different kinds of light. And it triggers all kinds of different positive cascades and chain reactions within our body. I've been using red light therapy for a long time. It wasn't until it started to get really popular that I figured, I might as well talk about this. People want to hear about it. So let's dive into the benefits and what it can actually do for you. You're tuned in to the internet's leading performance, nutrition, and fat loss channel. New videos on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. I want you to go ahead and hit that little red subscribe button, then hit that bell icon so you can turn on notifications and know whenever I go live or post a new video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and break down this thing that I'm talking about lately, red light therapy. Okay, red light therapy is also known as photobiomodulation. All it is essentially using a very specific kind of red light that transfers through your skin with a specific wavelength and hits the cell and acts upon that cell and causes it to create more energy and do a multitude of different things that we'll talk about. So it's really pretty simple in nature, okay? We're just getting exposed to the proper kind of light. Now, here's what's interesting. We a lot of times think that we only absorb light through our eyes because it's just what we see. But the fact is our skin absorbs light. Okay, our skin absorbs light, and that's how our cells actually get to be able to react to that light. So if we close our eyes, our skin still recognizes that there's light hitting it. It doesn't just have to absorb through our eyes. If we were asleep and it was broad daylight, there's a good chance that we'd wake up more frequently because our cells are receiving a signal that it's daytime and it's getting light. Now, when we start looking at the cool science of all of this, we understand that the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell, actually has a receptor that can pick up this light. It's called cytochrome C oxidase, okay? And it picks up this light specifically. So the mitochondria is what produces ATP. It's what produces energy within our cell. So when we have this activity, we have this light coming in, it acts upon the mitochondria, specifically the cytochrome C oxidase, and causes a reaction. Now, what we do know from a lot of this research is that there's a huge increase in ATP production when a cell is exposed to red light. There's also a huge reduction in reactive oxygen species, which means we're having less overall cellular waste. So we're producing more energy with less waste. Now, why this is happening, we're still uncovering, although it's starting to compile through different forms of research. We're starting to figure out what's going on. The other cool thing is that it improves what's called nitric oxide synthase, nitric oxide activity within the body. So it makes it so that we have an increase in blood flow. So even though we're having this positive reaction at the site of one cell, it can have an overall reaction throughout the rest of the body. So let's go ahead and talk about 5 different benefits so that it all makes sense. Now, there's a lot more than 5, but we'll just stick to 5 today. The first one is the anti-inflammatory effect. If you've seen my videos before, you know I'm always talking about inflammation. Inflammation is something that is very powerful within our bodies, and it's the root of just about everything. Well, studies have now shown that when you utilize red light therapy for even a small amount, you have a significant decrease in what's called tumor necrosis factor 1 alpha, and then a significant decrease in what's called interleukin 1 alpha, and a subsequent decrease in interleukin 6. These are all components of the inflammatory system that cascade inflammation throughout our body. So if we can combat this through red light therapy, through whatever means it is, that's a powerful thing in and of itself. But that's kind of a broad one. So let's go ahead and talk about the next one, which is something a lot more specific, and that is skin health. Now, a lot of people notice when they utilize red light therapy that their skin tone improves. And some people think that it's just the simple fact of light hitting your face. It's something different. No, the fact is our complexion actually improves. It gets better because red light therapy improves collagen production within the body, and it does so quite dramatically. It does so through an interesting way. It improves what are called fibroblasts, but it also improves what's called platelet-derived growth factors. So what that means is it's a growth factor that's derived literally from our platelets within our blood, in our blood plasma, okay, and it applies it to our skin. Now, when we have an increase of fibroblasts, we have a direct increase of collagen being able to go to the site and do its job. Fibroblasts are like the scaffolding for our collagen, scaffolding for our skin. We have fibroblasts, we have elastin, we have procollagen type 1s and 3s. All these things play a role. The fibroblasts are the core of that. So if we have an increase in that directly, we know that we're able to build better skin. And it's more than likely a result of what is called decreased apoptosis. So normally a cell has a pre-programmed cell death. Like it's designed to die at a certain time, really. unless it's acted upon by an unbalanced force, for lack of a better way of saying it. So when a cell is programmed to die, it just regenerates, does its thing. Well, sometimes we have this premature cell death that isn't supposed to occur. So what's happening is if we can stop that premature cell death, then we actually allow the body a chance to catch up and build on top of something that would normally have to just overbalance or overcome what's already being lost. So in other words, we're improving the amount of cells that are actually available for healing, not just replacing old cells. And then of course it improves what's called vascular perfusion, which is just the ability of blood to actually leave the actual artery or vein and get to where it needs to go. Once a capillary hits an organ, well obviously there has to be a level of perfusion. So if we can increase that, we can increase the delivery of nutrients. That's exactly why red light therapy improves in the skin department. Now, let's go ahead and talk about how it improves in sleep. This is how I got turned on to red light therapy. I have battled with sleep for a long time. There was a period in my life where I was really struggling. No matter what, I could not just sleep at night. It was just brutal. So every half an hour or just periods of insomnia. Well, red light therapy plays a huge role in that for a lot of people, but for me, that's how I got turned on to it. So let's explain how that works. You see, we have a particular part of the hypothalamus, portion of our brain, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is responsible for regulating our melatonin production, but also regulating our temperature, which again plays a role that's going to sleep. If our body cools down, we go to sleep. Now, a lot of people have thought that it's just a simple reaction of the red light triggering the response in our body to make us go to sleep. But what it is it's sort of mimicking a circadian rhythm at a heightened degree. Normally, we're supposed to be exposed to certain amounts of red light. Okay, red light is very important. You wake up in the morning and you expose yourself to the light from the sun. That is literally red light. The morning light is red light. And that's why when you get up in the morning and you get outside, a lot of times our rhythms start to balance. But this day and age, we're so exposed to blue light and so much of our lives indoors that we're not getting the right balance of red and blue light. We're not getting that contrast. So what red light therapy does is it amplifies the signaling, so it overall enhances our ability to ultimately get to sleep. Now, don't take my word for it. So the Journal of Athletic Training took a look at two groups of individuals. Okay, so 10 female volunteers that were exposed to red light therapy and 10 female volunteers that were exposed to placebo. Now, for 14 days, they had them utilize red light therapy, 30 minutes in the red light group, and of course the other group received placebo. They wanted to measure a few things. They wanted to measure their overall quality of sleep based on a questionnaire, but then they wanted to also measure their overall melatonin serum levels, and then they wanted to measure their performance in a 12-minute run, see how it affected their performance the next day. Well, here's what's interesting. The red light therapy group, after 14 days, showed significant improvement compared to the placebo group on all counts. But the one that's truly measurable, which is the melatonin levels, was where we really saw something interesting. The red light group had an increase of 38 picograms per milliliter of melatonin versus the other group, 21. So almost double the amount of melatonin being produced in the red light group compared to the other. Simply proving that from a hormonal side and a neurotransmitter side, we were getting a positive result on sleep simply by utilizing red light therapy. That's all it took. So sleep was the entry point for my relationship with red light therapy. Although red light therapy has a bunch of other benefits, which we're going to talk about in a second. But I do want to take a second to let you know that if you want to try out red light therapy, you can check out Jude down below in the description. So Jude is the leader when it comes down to red light therapy devices. No one else is doing it. They figured out red light therapy and they figured out infrared therapy if you want to have them combined. So I utilize my two devices all the time. I have my portable little one that I travel with, but then I have my big panels that I use when I'm here at my office. Now my office is also my kitchen studio and is also my gym. So I'll use it before I work out, and a lot of times I'll use it before I work out. So I know it's a huge improvement in my overall mental capacity, but overall I just feel like I have more energy. So I wanted to make sure that anyone that's watching this video that wants to try red light therapy doesn't have to go and subscribe to some expensive membership at a gym or something like that. You can get your own device by checking them out down in the description. So big thank you to Jude and big thank you to anyone that's watching this video. So let's go ahead and move on to the next thing, which is the benefit of overall performance and recovery. This is where things really start to shine. And if you wanted to try red light therapy, this would be a great reason to. Just because you see an improvement in your overall recovery and your performance. So this study was published in the journal Lasers of Medicinal Science. Took a look at 40 people divided into two groups once again. Okay. Now, both of these groups, they had to perform quadriceps. They wanted to push their muscles to compete. And then they exposed One group with red light therapy isolated quadricep, and another group with placebo. Well, they wanted to measure maximum voluntary contraction strength. Then they also wanted to measure overall creatine kinase levels, and then they also wanted to measure delayed onset. How much did it actually help with recovery? Well, they found that just utilizing red light therapy improved all markers. Now, they measured at multiple times, so they measured levels at 1 minute, at 1 hour, at 24 hours, at 48 hours, at 72 hours, and 96 hours. And they found, again, the red light therapy group showed improvement throughout the entire continuum, throughout every single allotted testing period. So a little bit of red light therapy right after the workout boosted recovery, reduced muscle soreness, reduced creatine kinase levels, and ultimately made it so the muscle contract tighter. Again, this all has to do with mitochondria. It has to do with mitochondria pumping out more ATP, but also a decrease in 2-glucose factor alpha that made it so that the body was able to recover. So imagine more energy with more recovery, all happening sort of from one episode. This is really important stuff. Okay, now lastly, we factor in the brain boosting effect. Now, this is still being discovered. We're still trying to figure out exactly what's going on. But we are noticing that those that utilize red light therapy have a big increase in beta amyloid plaque. Beta amyloid plaque doesn't just contribute to Alzheimer's. Beta amyloid plaque can just slow down your cognitive function altogether. So a lot of the studies are starting to allude to the fact that it's something to do with neurogenesis. So red lights are somehow affecting our neurogenesis, affecting the ability to grow new neurons and grow new nerve cells. So however it's doing this, we don't really know. But we're seeing an influx of stem cells as well. So red light therapy is improving stem cells that are being produced in the marrow, which could be having a big result in our brain later on down the line. A lot of this is just a chain reaction. We're having success in one area of the body, and it's balancing things out, whether it be from an endocrine standpoint or whether it be from a neurological standpoint. So at the end of the day, it's all coming together to just get better. So if you're really looking to optimize yourself and get the most out of everything you're doing, red light therapy truly is something that you can add to your daily life that's going to help you in that department. It's weird at first. You're just standing in front of a red light. But the reality is, this special kind of light has the ability to penetrate through your skin and do some pretty interesting stuff. Now, if I could look at my crystal ball, I would say that honestly, in the next 3 to 4 years, or very concrete research coming out, very reputable journals showing that we have very powerful effects with red light therapy. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. And again, if you want to check out a red light therapy device that actually works and has done a lot of the research themselves, check out Juve down below in the description. As always, I'll see you in the next video. Comment if you have any ideas or questions.
Hey everybody, Drew Prode here, host of the Broken Brain Podcast. Today I have Scott Nelson on the podcast talking to us about red light therapy and light therapy. He's one of the co-founders of Juve. It's a company that's doing some innovative stuff in this space, but more importantly, I want him to get you excited about the potential and the possibility of light therapy. You're going to love this interview. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Broken Brain Podcast, where we dive deep into the topics of neuroplasticity, epigenetics, mindfulness, functional medicine, mindset, and more. I'm your host, Drew Prode, and each week my team and I bring on a new guest who we think can help you improve your brain health, feel better, and live more. This week's guest on the podcast is entrepreneur and inventor Scott Nelson. Scott is one of the co-founders of Juve and an advocate for light therapy, which we're talking about in this podcast today. Prior to starting Juve, Scott spent his entire professional career in leadership positions with some of the largest medical device companies in the world, including Medtronic and Boston Scientific. In his spare time, Scott is also the host of MedSider Radio, a top-ranked medical device podcast, which I want to hear more about. Scott, welcome to the Broken Brain Podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Drew, and that intro made me sound way more important than I really am. But I'll take it.
You'll take it. And I know it's a team behind everything you guys do. Shout out to your co-founders. We're going to talk about them and how you guys started and everything else. But before we do that, here's a cool quote from Dr. Michael Hamblin, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, associate professor at Harvard Medical School. Here's what he has to say about light therapy in your company. The benefits of photobiomodulation have been proven in hundreds of clinical studies. With full body light therapy from Juve, you can experience systematic benefits in the comfort of your own home. I use them myself, and it comes highly recommended. So first of all, congratulations. I know that this doctor is very accredited, but also it's tough to get quotes from people that are in the academic space. But that all leads me up to this question of what the heck is photobiomodulation and why should our listeners care about it?
Yeah, no, we're fortunate to have Dr. Michael Hamlin, arguably one of the world's most well-known kind of researchers when it comes to photobiomodulation, which you pronounce very well. But on that note, it's really the study of the impact of certain wavelengths of light on our biology. And most of the science revolves around a very specific window within the quite broad light spectrum, namely red and near-infrared light wavelengths, and the wide variety of benefits that we can experience by exposing ourselves to these types of wavelengths of light.
So sometimes you hear it referred to as light therapy, you hear red light therapy, and then I guess the scientific term, which is photobiomodulation. What does Juve do within those terms?
Yeah, all of those terms really kind of refer to the same thing. In fact, most of the traditional academics, people like Dr. Michael Hamlin, Dr. Praveen Irani, most of those photobiomodulation researchers are getting more and more consensus around calling laser therapy, or LLLT, which is another acronym that you often find in PubMed as an example, and really trying to get consensus around calling this photobiomodulation, because that's really what it is. But to the layperson, it's light therapy, it's red light therapy, it's near-infrared therapy. Those are often different ways to describe the same thing.
So, why is light important to our body, and what is it interacting with to produce some pretty exciting results that we're going to be talking about in a little bit? We'll just start off with the basics. What does red light do, and how does it interact with our body?
Yeah, so before I answer that question, I think this is a really interesting thing, because most listeners that are tuning in, they're like, red light therapy, bright red lights, like, this seems kind of bogus. It seems kind of woo-woo science.
And also, like, what are you talking about? Are you talking about, like, a red light bulb that you buy from, like, a store? Are you talking about wearing glasses?
Exactly, and we'll hopefully get into some of those differences. But interesting enough, on my drive up here for this podcast, I had a conversation with an engineer buddy of mine, and he made that same comment. He's like, I'm seeing all of your posts on LinkedIn about, like, all of these different benefits that come from light therapy. He's like, I'm kind of almost to the point that, like, he's like, and I'm not a skeptic, but I'm kind of at the point where it's like, is this all really that true? Like, are there all these, various benefits, wide-ranging benefits that come from, red and light therapy? I was like, look, like, it sounds, I don't blame you, it sounds like too good to be true. It sounds like a late-night, TV infomercial. But the unique thing about this modality, it's I would argue, it's probably one of the very few modalities that's supported by so much published, peer-reviewed science. So all of the benefits that we'll get into they're all, anyone can look at these studies. They're all published and readily available on PubMed. But some of those benefits include everything from enhanced muscle recovery to reduced joint pain and inflammation to better cognitive function or brain health. There's really even some interesting, compelling science that hopefully we'll discuss in a little bit more detail around enhancing hormone health that comes from red and near-infrared light exposure. So tons of benefits, but they all kind of. This topic is so underappreciated because most people, myself included, 3 or 4 years ago, before we started Juve, did not think that light should be a sort of fit into the equation for overall health. And that's one of our mission statements at Juve, is to bring more awareness and get people to realize, or help people to realize, that light is this underappreciated aspect to our health, and we should be more cognizant of it. Both, exposing ourselves to the wrong kinds of light, but also exposing ourselves to the right kind of light, the healthy kind that can induce some of these benefits.
We've heard Dr. Hyman, a business partner, he talks regularly about this on his podcast, and he says that food is information, but what you're also talking about is light is information. So how does light affect our mitochondria?
And I'll start out with 2 different parallels. Hopefully most people understand what it is. So we're here in Southern California. It's hard to drive by a We're all familiar with the concept that a solar panel sort of harnesses energy from the sun and then repurposes that elsewhere throughout the house for our electricity needs. So if most people kind of understand that concept, on kind of the flip side to your point about food being information, we all understand that our bodies respond differently to to various macronutrients. Proteins, fats, carbs. As an example, if I eat a high glycemic carbohydrate late at night, it's going to spike most likely my insulin levels are going to spike. Not a great recipe for overall health. Where our bodies respond to different wavelengths of light as well. As an example, UV light. Most of us understand that, especially when it comes to UVB wavelengths of light, our bodies respond and produce more vitamin D. And so this concept of like our bodies metabolizing different wavelengths of light is not really new when you kind of set the foundation for some of those parallel examples. But I think that's where we have to start in answering some of these basic questions. Is that our bodies just they respond to light in various ways, some negative, some positive, and at the highest of levels, these certain wavelengths of light, actually within a very narrow spectrum, red and near-infrared specific, they actually help the mitochondria in our cells, the powerhouse, the engines of our cells, produce more ATP. And there's some various mechanisms of action that we'll talk about. That's sort of the core mechanism of action. These red and near-infrared wavelengths of light stimulate the engines, the mitochondria of our cells, to produce more of this energy, and so our cells just function better. And because of that core mitochondrial activity, that's why you see such wide-ranging benefits that are proven based on published peer-reviewed science. Like these wide-ranging benefits that I just mentioned. They're very wide. There's a lot of them, but it all sort of harkens back to that main core mechanism of action.
Yeah, and what's exciting is, first of all, thank you for being here. We don't have a lot of people that have products that come on the podcast, but the reason we wanted to have you on when our team connected with you and your team is that I really see you and your co-founders as advocates for light therapy,